friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Leslie from Joleelee Creations, and today we are going to be making the amazing Cici Tote by Kaya Papaya. This is a full-size tote that has a front pocket, an adorable accent at the bottom. It has a slip pocket on the back as well. On the inside, it has a full compartment. It has the option for a tablet slip pocket. I've just done a zipper pocket. Zipper pocket that's about 9 inches long. So it's a huge bag for tons of room. It has a slip pocket that I've divided into 3 sections. 2 for your phone, for other little things, and then a pin pocket. So tons of room for just about anything you can carry. It also has a option for a key holder. It makes it super nice. A couple weeks ago, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, so I wanted to take the time to make this bag for her so that she had something to carry with her to doctor's appointments, all the procedures that she has to go to and everything. And this bag just was the perfect fit to be able to showcase just a little bit of what she's going through, a full surprise lining on the inside, and not really like bam in your face, but something subtle just to help her get through all the tough times that she has ahead. So I know this pattern has been out for quite a while, but sometimes you just need to take a step back, really focus on what's speaking to you right now, make a bag that really makes you happy. And that's kind of where our tagline, Create Your Own Happiness, came from. It's just from really, truly, you know, all things aside, no matter what's going on in life, no matter what comes out, what other people are making, make what makes you happy. Tons of designers have came out with patterns this week that I wanted to make. There's, you know, my agenda was so long of what I wanted to do, but when this came up, this is what spoke to me. This is what I wanted to make this week. And it took me several days. I wasn't feeling my best. I made silly mistakes. Tears were cried, not from what you'd expect. But you'll see in the video, I included all my mishaps and everything for you, so you can learn too. We're all human. We're all going through things, and you know, if you can take anything from it, just really create what makes you happy today. So I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial. And let me know in the comments below if you do. And if you make this bag, I'd love to see as well. For this pattern, there are so many pieces, so I'm not going to go over and show everyone completely individual. But I am doing a mixture of black vinyl on the exterior, so our handles, our strap connectors, and our base, and then our accent for the bottom will be black. For our accent pieces, I have edge coated the edge of our accent pieces and done a small embroidery on that panel. Our zipper plackets will be pink, our front pocket accents will be pink, and our main body will be pink. For the interior, I have used cotton woven and I've interfaced with a woven interfacing. Currently, I am using Wizardry and Stitchery Geeky Fuse. And then I have used Decaville Light on the exterior pieces and Decaville Heavy on the exterior base. For hardware, I'm using these connectors here from Siah Swag, as well as a moon magnet for the front pocket. We want to work with our base first. I have marked out the interfacing lines, adhered my Decaville Heavy to the base, and I have marked out, according to the pattern pieces, where our purse feet go. We also need to mark out 3/4 of an inch from the outside edges, and we need to stitch down our interfacing. I'm going to line up my grid to the edge and draw a line of our interfacing. Now I'm going to stitch down along this box that we just drew to hold on our interfacing. I like to do the stitching for the base piece before I add my purse feet, just so we don't get close to the purse feet if you use large ones. The small ones I normally don't have an issue, but sometimes the bigger base ones can hit the edge of the foot. And now we have our exterior based top stitched. We can flip it over and we can add our purse feet to our marks that we've already made. I'm just going to use a cutting mat to keep my workspace safe. Use the washers that came with my purse feet. Line that up evenly onto the lines that I've drawn and mark into each slot. And I do like to mark with the prongs in mind. For this style, the prongs open outwards. So our prong feet are going to go in, and I want them to open this way. If I were to put my bracket like this, then the bracket's going to stick out into the base. So with that in mind, I am marking these in this direction. Now we can take our craft knife and make a small slit for each of these lines that we made for our purse feet. You do have to use a little bit of pressure because we do want to go through the Decaville and the vinyl onto the back side. And then now we'll insert our purse feet from the back side. So find our little holes that we marked. Put our purse feet in. Slide our prongs down onto our bracket and push open. And we're going to do the same for all 5. To secure these onto the base, I do like to use something a little bit stronger, like the Gorilla Tape or duct tape, to really hold those on and to prevent them from pulling out of the bag later on if they were to get snagged. I feel like this just secures it a little bit and then protects it from rubbing on the lining on the inside. While I have the black thread on my machine, I want to work on my straps and strap connectors. So I'm going to draw a center line down the middle of all of them. Now I want to place double-sided tape along the side of each line and fold to the center. And now we need to top stitch down both sides of our shoulder straps. Okay, working with our strap connectors now, we want to mark a 2-inch fold down from the top. So to do that, I'm going to mark 4 inches, and then that way I can meet up my raw edge line with my 4-inch mark here. So it'll be a 2-inch fold over once I put it on that mark there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark all of these 4 inches. Then we'll take a small piece of double-sided tape at the edges of our raw edge here. And we'll take our strap connector, slide it on to our strap connector piece, remove the tape, and bring this down to meet our 4-inch line. And we'll do that to all 4 pieces. And I'll flip these over and add a strip of double-sided tape down the back center of these 4 straps. We will be top stitching these onto the bag, so if your machine has trouble going through double-sided tape, just make sure you use a thin enough piece of double-sided tape so you aren't stitching through that. And we'll sit these aside for now. Okay, so now we're going to begin working with our exterior slip pockets. And for that, I'm going to be using the pink vinyl and a cotton interior. So we're going to place these right sides together. Add a clip to hold them in place, and then stitch down at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance across the top short edge. Flip both pieces back wrong sides together, pressing our seams out pretty well. And I do like to roll the edges with the pink being a hair over the top of the cotton, so you don't see the cotton peeking through the pocket. But what we need to keep in mind when we top stitch is that because the cotton's going to be a tad bit below, we need to do just a hair more than 1/8 of an inch to make sure we catch that, because we don't want to stitch and slip off that cotton on the back. But I do like the looks of it when you can't see that cotton pocket from the front side. So just a hair more than you normally would, just to give it some room to not fall off the edge. And we'll do the same thing for our other pocket. Right sides together, clip, and stitch together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we've set one of our pieces off to the side for our back pocket, and our front pocket I want to add my nameplate and I want to add my moon magnet on that. So I need to find the center of my front pocket on both the bottom and the top. So I'm going to line that up there, and then I need to use my ruler to find this center. Now I like to use tape when I'm sewing, and this is cheap masking tape that I get from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to line that up right between those center marks that I made on the top with the chalk and the bottom here. So I'm going to line up my ruler along the top edge of my pocket, match it up with my mark, and match it up with the center of my triangle on the bottom. And I'm going to draw a line down the center. I want my tag 3 inches up from the bottom of this pocket. And you can also place your tag on the accent. I have just made this bag before, so I made notes as to where I really liked the placement for it. So that's how I got this measurement. I encourage you to use your pattern pieces, use your markings, and make notes whenever you make it, so that when you go back and reference, you can be like, oh, I didn't like where that tag was. I wish it was a little higher, or I wish it was a little lower. And then that will help you the next time you make it. So I'm just going to mark out my marks for my prongs for my tag. Using our X-Acto knife, make a small slit just through the front exterior. And before I add that tag and take off the tape, we want to find the placement of our magnetic snap. So for that, we can just eyeball it and stick it straight on. There is a little screw on the back side of this, so I just want to loosen that up a tad. Slide that on, then we can double check our measurements from the side. And then now we can flip that over, screw this screw back in place. And I actually don't feel like that is thick enough. So I'm going to cut a piece of Therafuse, the self-adhesive kind, just big enough to fit behind this tag. I'm going to mark my placements here. So I know where that goes. Pull this off. Just add that right up on the inside, just to give it a little bit more thickness to be able to hold this in place. And just add the tiny screws through the back to secure the magnet. Add this back on to keep it from getting scratched while we make the bag. And now I can remove this and add my nameplate. And because this one is on the inside of the bag and is inside the pocket, I'm a little bit more worried about the prongs rubbing through. So I'm going to use something a little bit sturdier, or softer rather, like Therafuse, just to give it that padding. The Gorilla Tape works really well, but this will give it the padding that it needs to keep from rubbing against this pocket here. So now we have our nameplate added and our magnetic snap to the top. Okay, now we need to attach our front pocket to our main body panel. I have marked the centers with clip marks on the front panel, and I need to draw a line down the center with a chalk pencil. I really like this Clover chalk pencil because it's super easy to remove. And then I'm going to line up my ruler along the top edge. It's a little bit hard with this table. And I'm going to center this main line here on the center of my ruler along my white center line. Now I can match the centers of my pocket on the top and the bottom with the mark along the top. So I know the size of my pocket on the top, like the width across the top, so I can match that up to my ruler, line up the center point at the bottom, and use masking tape to tape that in place so that we can get it to the machine and top stitch or baste that in place so it doesn't shift when we add our connector straps on. Just make sure everything is lined up straight. And now we can baste this pocket on around the edges. My lining pocket did slip out a little there, but it will be okay as our straps are going to cover that. This vinyl is a little stretchy. Now we'll add this pocket on. Since this vinyl was a little stretchy, I'm going to stitch down this side, and then I'm going to come to this side over here. And top stitch from the top down over here. Going forward, I would probably baste this pocket together before I added it to the front of the bag so that I didn't have any issues, or maybe less issues with the bunching and stretching. Okay, now we need to attach our strap connectors to our front and rear panels. I did notice when I was connecting the back side of these that I was struggling with this area here, how it kind of opens up a little, and when we line it up along this pocket and you top stitch, it kind of slid off and it wasn't as even as I would have liked. So I am gonna go in and add a longer piece of double-sided tape behind this piece in here. And we could have done that at the beginning when we connected our straps together, but I didn't think about it till I got to my notes on this part. So if you haven't already done your straps connectors, add just a little bit of tape in this area here so that we can line up these edges evenly, so when we top stitch it doesn't fall off that edge. Okay, so we are going to line up our 6-inch ruler with our middle points on the top and the bottom, and draw a line with our chalk pencil on each side of that. This one's a little tricky just because of our nameplate and our magnet. Just kind of lean your ruler over and then we'll double check to make sure that we have it even along the top and the bottom. So then I'll just double check up here. Okay, and then before I attach my straps, we're going to top stitch up one side, across the top, and down. So I like to take my little ruler, line it up with the bottom of my hardware, and give myself 1/4 of an inch line. That way I can stitch across that line and I have a good pivot point, and it helps me keep my line straight. So there's nothing worse than the front focal point of your bag and you have a little crooked line. So just line that up on my grid, give myself a straight across line to go by, and then now we can add these. What we need to mark our line across the top, how far down they go. Okay, so now we have that marked. Make sure everything's lined up and looks straight. That looks a little off, so let me see. Okay, where I stitched on my pockets before and I had a little bit of stretching and it pulled down this way, I need this side to go up a little bit and this side to go down. So I removed a few of the stitches from the basting and I'm going to stitch backwards to try and push this up just a little bit, and I'm going to stitch down that side just to see if I can get those stitches to even out a little bit and straighten out that pocket. So for these pockets, I definitely recommend stitching down both sides just to prevent any stretching as you go around basting if you have a stretchier vinyl. Like I said, that little pucker will be okay because we're just going to put the strap right over the top of that. We also need to add our magnet to the back side of that. So before we put our straps on, I think it'll be easier if we add that. So we know where our center point line is there, but I'm just going to add a little bit of chalk onto the back side of that magnet, just so we can get an exact fit of where that is. And you can see our little circle is right here. So there's our center point for our magnet. Don't think you can see on the camera the little chalk mark. So we'll take our magnetic snap back. Oops, the stitch is pulled out. Line up our center point. And mark our sides for our slits. Take our X-Acto knife. Add our magnet. Make sure everything lines up. And because this one really won't be rubbing too much and I need the stability for the magnet to pull, because you're going to be opening and closing it a lot, I will use the Gorilla Tape on this one. Okay, so now we're back with our pocket that I readjusted just a little bit. We have our side marks and our top marks where we are going to add our connectors. So we're going to remove the double-sided tape from the back of the connector that we made. going to pull this a little taut, but not too much because I don't want to stretch my vinyl. Line up the top of the connector vinyl and line up that inside piece of the vinyl to the line that we drew. And now we need to do the same for the other side. So we removed the tape from the back. Going to line up the top part of our vinyl straight across with our connector and line up the inside edge of this vinyl here, and then I can just push that crease just a little bit under so that our pocket is smooth. And our connectors should be evenly placed and spaced along the top part of our bag there. So now we need to switch back to our black thread, and I need to top stitch along the side, across the top line that we drew, and back down. So I will need to probably switch to a skinny foot just so that I can make sure to fit in between the connector hardware and that line. When we get to the top, I just want to make sure that my hardware is pulled tight and is even along that line that we drew. Use a hump jumper if you need to protect your vinyl and your hardware. Okay, so now we need to mark our rivets on our strap. The pattern calls for them to be marked about 1 inch apart. I think that's a little bit too far apart from my liking. So I'm going to do a 1/2 inch apart, and I'm just drawing a center line down the middle of my strap. And then I'm going to mark 1/4 inch past my stitching just so that it's even and I can mark it with each other on the same. So I'm going to, and we want it to be above this pocket. So I'm going to mark 1/4 inch there, and then a 1/2 inch down from there should put us just below our pocket seam. So I have it just above my pocket lip and then just below my pocket seam. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Mark the center of my strap. Mark 1/4 inch past my stitching. And then a 1/2 inch past that mark. You can draw another mark. So need to repeat that for this side. I have my cam snap press set up with a 2.5 millimeter punch die. So I'm just going to line that up to the crosshairs that we made on the strap and punch the holes on all 4 straps. change out the punch die to my rivet setter. This is the 10mm die with 9x9mm rivets from Siah Swag. I've just found that this size rivet is pretty universal for everything that I've needed to do. It works really well for thin, thick, and it's just a good middle ground for all of the things. So sometimes you can get denting in your rivets, so I do like to put the long side in first on the top. That way the denting is caused from this long post going into the cap if it's not the right size. Like I said, this one's been pretty universal for me, so I haven't had much of an issue, but it just eliminates the risk of getting the dents in those caps when they're on the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and push those together and then secure them with my press. Brought you over to my cutting table for just a second because I realized I made a kind of critical mistake and I just want you guys to troubleshoot this with me. I put the Decaville out of the seam allowance, but I put it on the bottom. This is supposed to be on the top. So because the way we attach our accent piece on the bottom, that has it out of the seam allowance. So this should be out of the seam allowance on the top, so when we top stitch, it's out of the way. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully remove the Decaville from along the top. And I have TheraFuse self-adhesive, and I'm just going to attach that on the bottom, slightly larger than the Decaville, so that it can just overlap and then give it some structure on the bottom. So I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to line it up along the top. And I'm going to, with very, very light pressure, just run it along the edge of my ruler. And again, we are not cutting through our main body panel. I just want to get enough to get the Decaville cut. And then I can try and peel it up by itself here. If it gives me too much trouble, I can turn on my blow dryer, warm it up just a little bit, use my blow dryer to warm up the adhesive and peel it off. So now I've removed the Decaville from the top part. I can take my TheraFuse and I am going to cut about 1 inch wide. Then I can just peel off this adhesive backing. Line up the bottom and my side seam allowance. And that's how we avoid that. So now while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and add my accent piece, and it's going to line up along the bottom edge and overhang by this little excess here where we're going to attach the bottom. So you can use double-sided tape, you can use spray adhesive. We just need to make sure that this stays in place. And because this vinyl is a little stretchy, I did interface it with a woven interfacing to try and keep it from stretching on me a little bit. So I'm just taking the 505 temporary spray adhesive and doing a light spray along the bottom. And now we'll top stitch along both of those and down the sides to baste those together. So for the first time, and I'm sure it probably won't be the last time, I completely forgot to hit record when I came back over to my sewing machine. I have gone ahead and I have top stitched the accent piece along both sides, the front and the back. And then I have attached the bottom. The bottom we attach to the little piece of excess from the overlay on the bottom, and I did find it was easier top stitching with our front and back panels, or stitching with our front and back panels on top versus adding it to versus flipping it over on the other side. So once we stitched the bottom on, we pushed the seam allowance over towards our base and top stitched along the bottom side of the bottom panel. So not along the bottom of our bag, but on the base. So our seam allowance is pushed over towards the base on each side, and then we've top stitched on the actual base. So now you'll have the line of top stitching and then your square around the bottom. So that's where we are at now. Now we're going to take our main body panels. We are going to line up our accent panels along the side. And we really want to make sure that the edges line up right there where those are, so that when our seams are sewn together, they line up. And we're just going to clip that along the side. And if you did line up it with, if you lined up with the bottom, you should be pretty close to having perfect match along both sides. And then do the same for this side. I'm lining up the seams, and because our seam allowance is a 1/2 inch, you really want to make sure that it's lined up a 1/2 inch in, because it can be lined up on the edge, but if it's kind of at an angle, then still when we stitch it, it's not going to be the same. So kind of pull it back to our 1/2 inch seam allowance, line it up all the way to the 1/2 inch mark, and clip it together. And now we need to stitch along the sides at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. For this, because I have such contrasting colors with the black and the pink, I did switch my thread back to pink so that this area here can be stitched with pink. And then when I get to the base, I'm going to switch it back to black and then box my corners with the black thread once we get to the bottom. I was afraid that whenever we turn the bag out, sometimes you can see a little bit of stitching in between the two layers and in the bottom seam, so I want that to color match. If you don't have contrasting colors that bad, or you just don't care, you don't need to switch out the colors, but it's just one of those nice little things, since I have both threads set up and I have both bobbins, that I might as well just stitch to here with the pink and then switch to the black at the bottom, just to eliminate the risk of the pink color showing through. To join the two areas here, I'm going to trail off just inside the seam allowance and backstitch in the seam allowance, so I don't have a double backstitch where I need to start and stop my colors. So I've just trailed off just a hair and backstitched over here. So when I start my black stitching, I can top stitch, or I can backstitch right on top of that thread and then continue on the bottom. I'm afraid that I'd perforate it if I backstitched both colors to secure the threads there. So it's just, my backstitch is just on the inside of that seam allowance right there. And do the same for the other side. Okay, so I've changed my thread back to black, and I'm going to continue on stitching down the seam allowance on the side. So I'm going to drop my needle right in that, just above our black accent, back stitch, and then continue on sewing to the bottom. Do the same for the other side. And now we need to box our corners. So to box our corners, we're going to butterfly open our bottom seam and make that flush against the bottom. Add a couple clips to hold that in place. Do the same for the other side. Butterfly open the bottoms. Add a clip in that seam. Because I gave myself a little break last night after not recording, my temporary adhesive has separated from the accent here at the bottom. Some of you may have added double-sided tape to add your accent, so that would it wouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to add a strip of double-sided tape now, just so that that base can stitch properly. So you just want to make sure that that part is adhered correctly before we stitch our bottom. Okay, so now our side pieces are adhered on. It'll be much easier to stitch that base. Like I said, I didn't have a problem the last time I used spray adhesive, so I think it was just because I let it sit overnight and it's temporary. So let's reclip the bottoms. Now we're going to stitch down the sides of our base with our 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now we have our completed exterior. I am going to turn it right sides out so that I can check for any puckers in the bottom. And I'm also going to do it as a drop-in lining, so I'll need it right sides out for that. Because of the Decaville Light and the Decaville Heavy at the bottom and vinyl, I really like to use a blow dryer because it just really softens up that glue so you don't end up with as many creases. As you saw when I used the blow dryer to loosen up the adhesive on the back, it just really makes it more pliable. So I'm going to do that real quick and flip my bag through. So now we have our bag turned right side out. Okay, so now we have our exterior done. We want to start working on our interior. I am going to use an overlay that we custom cut out and laser. I did put "You Got This" on the front. We have text options and logo options for those. This one is 9" for this pattern. Right now on the website we have 6, 7, and 8", but if there is a size that you'd want or something custom, feel free to email us. I have my zipper tape, I have my interior pocket lining, and I have my main body piece. So for my main body piece, I've already clipped my centers, and I need to mark 1.5 inches down from the top. And I'm going to use the center mark on my ruler. It has a 0 mark on this one. So I'm going to line that up in the center so I know exactly where the center mark is for that. And I'm going to draw a line with my chalk pencil across the top. And then I'm going to mark that center point here as well. I need to take my zipper overlay. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to add double-sided tape onto the back side of the overlay. I'm going to try and center it as much as I can so that I can avoid stitching through the tape once we add it to the bag. I have marked the center point on my overlay. Remove our top layer of sticky tape, and I'm going to line up that center point with the center mark along my line and carefully line up my overlay to my chalk line that I drew. Remove the tape from the bottom of the overlay and gently lay it down. You don't want to pull it down, you just want to gently lay it so that our box stays even the whole time. And now I'm going to top stitch around the entire overlay, starting and stopping at the ends, and I'm going to leave long tails so that I can pull it through to the back and not leave any back stitching on the panel. I do have a whole video on stitching these overlays, so if you'd like, I'll link that up in the top corner so you can check out that video. But I'm going to drop my needle on the bottom area of my overlay. Using a 4 stitch length, we're going to top stitch all the way around. You can walk your foot into the pivot points. And we do offer laser pivot points as well. so that you can guide yourself on the tougher corners. Before we get back to the beginning, we want to pull our thread tails from our start to the back side so that when we end up in the same hole, our thread tails are already in the back. And land back in that same hole of the first stitch that we started. Pull your thread tails long. And we want to pull those to the back side as well. So now you should have all 4 thread tails on the back side. Make sure you didn't pull out any of your stitching on the front. And tie off these threads together. Now we need to carefully remove the fabric from inside of our zipper overlay. You can take a pair of scissors, fold the fabric in half, carefully snip into our fabric area, making sure not to cut our overlay, and that will give us an area to stick our scissors in. And essentially we're going to go right underneath this overlay, and you should catch right up to the tape that is there, and we're going to trim the fabric from behind the overlay without trimming the overlay itself. If you need to, you can flip it over so you can see the back side. Lift up the overlay fabric and stick your finger to protect from trimming the actual overlay on the front side. And just carefully snip that fabric away. It doesn't have to be super pretty, so no one's ever going to see it. The zipper itself will cover the back side. Sometimes a larger pair of scissors will help. So now our window is completely exposed. We want to take our 2 lining panels and our zipper, and we want it to place our zipper right side up on one of our panels and line up the top of our zipper tape with the top of our pocket and stitch that on at 1/8 of an inch. Now take your zipper and push this flap down, increase it so that it becomes nice and flat. And we want to take our second piece of our lining pocket, right sides up with our zipper, line up the edges of the fabric and the edges of our zipper tape, and clip in place. So our pocket pieces should be facing right sides together so that if we were to unzip this zipper, we can see the inside pocket. And stitch this down at 1/8 of an inch. If you have your iron handy and this is giving you trouble staying down here, you can quickly iron that down. Take 2 strips of double-sided tape and line it up along the top and the bottom edge of that zipper, only extending to the edge of our fabric. So we don't need to go all the way to the end of the zipper tape, just to the end of that back stitching or stitching that we did. So starting here at the bottom. And we do want to keep it close to the edge of that zipper tape as possible so that we don't stitch through it when adding it to our overlay. Now that our tape is on, we can add our zipper pull. I do like to add my tape before my zipper pull because it can kind of bunch up once the zipper pull is on there and make a little bit of a bunchy area on your tape, your zipper tape and the regular tape. So that's just why I do the tape first before I put on my pull. Because my fabric is directional and I want my pull to be on the left side open to the right, I'm going to slide on my zipper pull from this end, separate the teeth, noting which tooth is higher on the end. I'm right-handed and I prefer to stick on this tooth first. And on this specific zipper pull, you can see right here that this tooth is a little bit higher. So I'm just going to nip off that tooth. So now this side is higher. Separate my teeth. Holding your pull in the direction you want it to go, right side's up. Stick your right tooth side first, your longest tooth, then your left side. I can see now that this tooth is higher, way higher, so I need to readjust my zipper pull so that it is only one tooth higher like when we started. Once you get it adjusted, it's just a slight little movement of the zipper pull inside, then you can slide on your zipper pull to the middle. We need to add our zipper to our overlay. So we're going to center this zipper pull in the middle of our overlay, making sure that our zipper tape and pocket extends and is center to our overlay. So looking at the back, we want to make sure that this pocket is fully covering our overlay and is as centered as we can get it. So now that I have that in place, I can flip it over and then I can worry about the placement of my zipper in the overlay. I'm going to carefully readjust. Grab my pull out of the way. And really focus on lining up these teeth on the middle of our overlay here on each side. Once I have that, I can pull my overlay and the lining pocket down. And remove the tape from the top of our zipper. And right now I'm just removing the top strip of that tape. Carefully lay your overlay back, line up the teeth in the center, line up the teeth in the center, and gently lay your overlay down onto your zipper tape. There is a bit of a texture difference on your zipper, and that's kind of where we want our zipper overlay to lay. So I have that centered there. Lift up the bottom of your main body and gently peel off the tape from the bottom of your zipper tape, making sure to keep your zipper pull out of the way. We're going to carefully lean our main body panel back down. Make sure it didn't get stuck on the way down. And gently lay that overlay onto your zipper tape. And sometimes if that fabric is folded up, it wants to be a little tricky. Just readjust as needed. So make sure our zipper teeth are in the middle. And now we need to top stitch our zipper on. We're going to start at the corner at the bottom, right hand side, stitch underneath the zipper to the other side, leaving our thread tails long. But before we do that, we do need to open up our pockets. So the top sheet of our pocket is going to be towards the top, so that when we're stitching along the bottom, we're only stitching along the bottom of this pocket here, and we don't sew our pocket closed. If we have this pocket flipped down when we stitch, we're going to stitch through that pocket and shut the pocket so you won't be able to open it. So butterfly your pockets open, flip it over, and top stitch along the bottom line here. This overlay has the pivot points along the box and the center. So I'm going to drop my needle in the box that's there, pull my pockets out to make sure that they are stable. I have long thread tails, and just stitch down the bottom of this zipper. I did have a little bit of an issue with my skinny foot bunching up and not really being wide enough to get on top of the pocket piece underneath. So I did switch back to my wider foot to help me keep up the even balance here. Pull our thread tails out long. And we need to pull those threads to the back side and tie off. Another option that I think would be okay, that I've seen some other patterns do, is flip them both up to the top when you top stitch along that pocket. And then when you come back down, the stitching will be underneath. So I think that's probably what I'll have to do with the skinny foot the next time, so you don't have that lip. So now we have our front piece top stitched along the bottom of our zipper. We're going to drop our needle in with both our pocket pieces down. Drop our needle in the last hole, stitch up the top, up the side, across the top, and back down. Again, making sure we pull our threads long so we can tie those off in the back. Pull our thread tails to the back and tie off into a knot. I normally want to trim these off, but since I'm going to close up the side pocket, I'm not going to trim them off until I stitch down the pocket. Then it'll stitch down these threads too and just give it another point of security. So I'm going to fold back our overlay gently. So gently pull back our front main body piece, and we're going to stitch up the side of our pocket to close it. And I back stitch over the zipper for a little extra security, and do the same for the other side. So pull these strings out to the side, lift back our overlay just a little, and then now I can trim these extra threads off now that they've been stitched down a little bit extra. If you are turning the bag through a pocket, you will need to leave this open. I am going to do a drop-in lining, so I'm going to go ahead and secure this pocket. I do like to stitch the bottom separate from the sides instead of starting at one end, going around the bottom and up the sides. And I do that because in case I ever need to get back into the bag through the pocket, if something ever happens, if I need to push out the corners, I can always cut the stitching out on the bottom and get in as if I were to have turned through the pocket. But if I stitch all the way around, then that's going to pull out the corner stitching and the side stitching as well. So if it's just secured along the bottom, then it's less likely to pull out if you ever just need to get in through the bag at the bottom of the pocket. And there are one side of our pocket or our lining is complete with our overlay installed. And I think that's going to be beautiful. Now working on our other lining pocket, we have a divided slip pocket, our main lining panel, and I've done an trim for the pocket. So that's just going to go right on top of the pocket. To make our slip pocket, I saw in another video that I watched, forget what bag it is, but if I can figure out which one it is, I'll write it in the comments or the description below. But it was an amazing trick. So we're going to draw a line about 1 inch along the bottom of each of the main panels. And since this is directional, I want to make sure it is the bottom. And we're going to fold, iron, or tape that bottom section up to this line that we just drew. So we're just going to fold this up to the bottom. And you can either take it over to your iron, or you can just quickly add a row of double-sided tape right under that line. So fold up this bottom. On both sides. And now we can put them right sides together, line up our bottom seams, add a couple clips to hold those together, and we're going to stitch down the sides at 1/4 inch seam allowance, just on the sides. Now we can turn our pocket right side out. Give it a nice tug. Press these seams out. You can take it to your iron if you need to, or just finger press them open. Your bottom seams should have a nice crease on the bottom. You can pull that tight, add a clip, and now we can add our trim to the top piece of our pocket. This area will get secured when we top stitch this pocket on, and then you don't have to worry about the wonky sides. It gives you a nice square or actual rectangle pocket just by sewing the sides. And I really find that you don't have those weird corners on the bag or on the pocket. It was a really amazing thing that I found, and I wish I knew which designer did that. So if that was you, or just let me know so I can give you credit. For the accent strip, most of them are cut to 1 inch. I like to do 1 1/4 inches, so it gives me a little bit of extra room on the back side of the overlay. So I'm going to mark about 5/8 line on the back of my panel. And then this side, I'm just going to give it a little bit of mark because I want to know which side this is. And that's the side I want to tape first. So I'm going to add a line of double-sided tape on this side. Carefully peel back the tape. And I want to line up my fabric along this side, the front side of my pocket. So if you have a good side and a bad side. And I'm going to line that up right on the line that I drew. And so this is going to be the front side here. And I actually have a sew-in tag that I want to add onto that panel. So let me grab that. So this is how our pocket will be, and I think I want to add my tag just on the inside of that pocket here. So let's just lift that up, add that here. Bring it down a little. And then we can flip it over and make sure it's lined up. Yep, still lined up on this side here. Now we'll add another double-sided tape just above that line. And fold it over to the back side, creasing as we go up against our fabric piece here. And you can certainly do a thinner trim if you'd like. I just like a little bit thicker trim. You can do 2 lines of stitching, and then you can make sure you catch the front and the back, especially when you add a little bit more on the back side. It compensates for the extra seam on the back and the fold over the top. You can get a nice crisp line. And then this also gives you room for rivets if you want to add rivets to secure. So I'm going to top stitch along the bottom of my accent piece. And now we can trim off any excess that hangs past our fabric on the sides. And if you'd like, you can edge paint the sides, or you can add a drop of glue to secure them, or you could just add the rivets on the sides and the center once we add it to our pocket. So now with our inside lining piece, we have our centers marked. We need to place our pocket 4 inches down from the top, centering the pocket on the main body. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my center point here because we'll need that to divide our pocket. And then because I do want this to be a bag that she can use for all of her appointments that she has to go to, I am going to add another line over here that will fit a pin. So she can have a nice pin slot. So for this one, I'm going to grab my bigger ruler, 4 inches down. Find my center point, which is going to be right here. Line up my center point, line up my pocket along the top. And I like to use masking tape to hold these slip pockets in place while I top stitch them on. For one last time, I'm going to switch back to pink thread, and I should need that, use that for the rest of the bag. I'm going to start just under my accent piece and top stitch along the bottom, the side, across the bottom, back up the top, and then I'll come back and split my pockets. If you're going to add rivets, I start just below my accent piece. If you're not going to add rivets, then I would go ahead and start your stitching at the top of your accent panels. That way it'll secure the flaps. If you start your stitching down here, you'll have a little bit of opening. So with the rivets, then you can leave that open so that the rivets won't be in the stitching. I do like to back stitch over where my seams will be. And now I'll go back and split my pockets on the line that we drew earlier. So now I'll go ahead and add rivets to the top points of all of my pockets. Sometimes I'm not sure where I want to place the rivets or what will look good in relation to my accent that I have. So I'll take the cap of the rivet size that I like, and I'm going to sit it right on top of that area. So now I can kind of see how big it's going to look and if I want it centered between the stitching and the top. And I'm just going to press that in. And then that's going to give me a mark of where I want my rivet hole to be. So now I can use that marking with my ruler to kind of measure and see how far down I want that to be. And it looks like it's going to be halfway between the top and my stitching. And now I can mark that the same way on both or all three of my other rivet points. So if you aren't sure how far over it needs to go from the side as well, you can do the same thing. So I know it needs to be over just to give myself a little bit of room. Push it down, and then we can make sure that that center point is the same and they line up. Because at the end of the day, sometimes you can measure everything, but visually and aesthetically are going to be two different things. So yes, you may want it to be lined up with these stitches, but if you don't know where the rivet's going to sit, then it may look like, you know, it's falling off the edge, or you may miss the mark. So sometimes it's just easier to see where it is visually and then double check with your ruler. So this one's a little bit low. So I just want to take my pin mark right where that is, and I'm going to mark my actual hole of where it needs to go. But visually it's going to be where it needs to be. So that one seems to be the same. Right about there. And double check that that one could go just a hair higher so that they're all in line with each other. We're going to now begin working on our zipper placard, or the recessed zipper for our bag. You have 4 pieces for the zipper, 2 exterior, and you can also use 2 lining or 2 of the main body exterior. I used both vinyl for mine. If you're using a domestic, you may want to use a combination of vinyl and fabric, or both fabric. It's just going to be the part of the bag that inlays that has the zipper in it. So to start that, there's several different ways that we can do this. I like to measure down 3/4 of an inch on both ends On the back side of my placard, add a piece of double-sided tape just above the line that we drew. Remove the tape and fold the raw edge down to meet that line that we just drew. You're going to want to repeat that for all 4 pieces, and then make sure they are the exact same length. If they aren't the exact same length, we may need to adjust one end of them. You just want to make sure that they line up so that once they are put together, wrong sides together with the zipper in between, you don't have any offset zippers. Working with our zipper teeth, we want to take one end, separate the teeth about 1 inch, fold the zipper teeth back down towards the back side so they're wrong sides together, pinch that together, bring your teeth back up, and fold the crease that we pinched together along your teeth. And that's going to form a 90-degree angle on our zipper teeth. I take a pen and going through all the layers, I secure that at the 90-degree angle. So on the back side, you should have a small triangle. And we want to do the same thing on the other side. So you can either draw a line before you start across both teeth, or I just fold this one back to the same area on this side, pinch, bring that up to the zipper teeth, make sure they're the same. This one looks a little high, so I need to move my pinch mark down just a hair, and then push it over towards the teeth. And they should line up. Secure this side with a pin. And now we need to baste down the outside edge of the zipper tape to secure those layers together to hold these at a 90-degree angle. We want to burn these threads on the edge. And if there's any excess zipper tape hanging over the edge, we need to trim that off. Now we want to take our first layer and we're going to call this one the exterior. So if you're using 2 fabrics, you're going to want to lay the exterior right side down. And I want these zipper teeth to be just below the seam line that we have for our top. Add a couple clips. And we want to baste this zipper on to our exterior piece with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. We don't want to stitch past our exterior piece here, or that will be seen on the next part. So our exterior is basted on, and if you were using a lining piece, then we're going to take the lining piece and we're going to sandwich it right sides together with the exterior piece and sandwich the zipper. We want to make sure these folded edges line up at the top. So I'm just going to add a couple clips to keep that in place. And we want to make sure that once we get to the bottom, that the bottom of these line up here as well. So if one's just slightly longer than the other, we just need to readjust. And we want to stitch this down at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we want to fold open our zipper, press our seams together, or apart rather, and put them wrong sides together with our zipper exposed, and clip these edges together so that now we can top stitch on this seam along the edge of our zipper. We want to make sure these seams are pressed well so that it's out of the zipper path, but we don't want to pull this one on the back side too far, or else when you top stitch on the top, you may fall off and not catch the back side. So we just really want to make sure that the edges are lined up, since we know they're the same size, and it's gently pressed away from the zipper to make a seam. And now we need to top stitch along our folded edge, down along the edge of our zipper, down, and baste our seams shut. Use your hump jumper if needed to get over that thick seam of the fold. And now we need to repeat for the other side. So we want to take this zipper placard, we want to add it face down, lining it up with the other side, and our teeth just above the zip, our teeth just below our fold. Line up the edge of our tape with the edge of our vinyl. And this is the exterior piece going face down. We want to make sure it's the same length as the other side and baste this side on. And now we need to add our last panel, right sides together, line up our edges, and clip everything into place. Making sure everything lines up at the end. If it lines up at the end, we can go ahead and stitch that down at 1/4 inch seam allowance, or whatever your zipper foot allows for. Just like we did for the other side, we need to open up our seam, fold back our panels so they're wrong sides together. Clip our edges together. to top stitch down the short sides, down the side of the zipper, down the other short end, and baste everything closed. And now our zipper panel is complete. So we need to grab our 2 lining panels and our 2 top accent pieces. For this part, we'll need our lining top, which I'm doing in vinyl, our cotton lining bottoms that we already assembled with our slip pocket and our zipper pocket, and our zipper pocket that we just completed. Because I'm making this a drop-in lining, I want to go ahead and mark the lines on the top. I'm going to fold down the top. And so for this one, I cut the Decaville a little bit more than I anticipated. I was hoping to do a 1/2 inch when I did my but I was so worried about fixing it that I cut 3/4 of an inch. So that is going to be the fold down line. But so to double that, I'm going to do 1.5 inches. And that's going to be my fold line. So instead of marking the 3/4 of an inch where I would fold, now I can fold the raw edge down to this line. And so I don't get confused, I'm going to draw a little arrow that this is the top of my bag. And I have already done that on this side as well with the arrow for the top. We need to find the centers on both of these. And I'm just going to do a small snip at the center point. As well as finding the center point on our zipper. So we want to fold that in half. And do the same for the other side. And I haven't added my zipper pull yet because we're going to want to add that once our bag is assembled. We're actually going to separate the zipper in just a few minutes. You need to decide which side you want as the back panel or the back side of your bag when you're looking into it. I like my back zipper panel to be against my body and the zipper to be going in the same direction from the closed on the left, open to the right. So I want this panel to stay with this side with the slip pocket is going to be facing this way. And I want this panel, the other panel, to come up to this side. So our zipper teeth are going to be facing each other, going the same direction. So when I turn this around to be right side up, the teeth are actually on my right hand side on the slip pocket side. And they're going to be on the left hand side on my zipper pocket. So we just want to make sure that they're going a different direction when we're facing them both right sides up. And then we want to add this zipper with our center points in the middle and clip along the top. And I'm going to do the same for this side. Find our centers, match those up. Add a couple clips. And now we want to baste those in place onto our lining bottoms. So we have both of our zippers basted on. We want to take our front panels, or our top lining panels, and we're going to place them right side up as where we would want our top facing the top, and fold them down so they're wrong sides together. Clip our centers. And we want to sew these together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're going to fold this zipper panel up with our seam allowance facing the main lining bottom. And we want to top stitch along the fabric underneath the zipper. If there's any overhang, we can just trim that off to match. And we're going to repeat that on our other side. Lift up our zipper pocket, push down that seam allowance towards the bottom, and top stitch just below the zipper panel. Now we need to take both of our panels. We're going to put them right sides together, making sure they're going the same direction. Line up our sewn seams on the side where our top lining piece meets our bottom lining piece. Clip that in place. And do the same for this side. Line up our accent pieces. Clip our tops together, and I'm going to add a clip onto our zipper pieces up top just so that those can stay out of the way. And we want to line up our bottom pieces as well. Before we sew our side seams together, we need to mark 1.25 inches or 2 inches and a quarter box along the bottom edge. Of both pieces, and we want to trim that square out. And do the same for this corner. And now we want to sew our side seams together for the top inch or so till we get down to about in here. We're going to sew at a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to gradually increase to 3/4 inch for the rest of the sides. Across the bottom, since I'm doing a drop-in lining, I am going to go all the way across the bottom. If you are turning the bag, leave a hole for you to turn the whole bag through and then finish through your pocket. And then also down the other side, and then increasing back up to a 1/2 inch at the top. We now want to open up our side seams, match up our seams on the bottom with our butterfly so we can box the corners. These edges should line up nice and even. You may need to pull apart your lining just a little bit, or stick your hand on the inside to really get a good flat edge for box corner. I usually have a little bit better look going from the top side and really pushing the seam out on the side, and then you can clip out on the edges out here to keep those nice and tight. And then we're going to stitch along this edge at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And we do want to trim off this excess in the corners and repeat on this side. Spread open our seams. Line up our seams together and stitch along our boxed corner at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we have our bottom boxed, and trim off the excess. And on the bottom seams, I do like to trim off the excess as well, so I'll just come in just inside of the box corners, trim off the excess lining about 1/8 of an inch, and gradually just get right up to that other boxed corner. So now we have a smaller seam at the bottom, and this is kind of how it looks at the side. And you can do the same thing for the side seam fabric. I'm just going to leave the top vinyl area since I'm going to fold down for a drop-in lining. I'm just going to leave that top area. Same thing for this side. Come in just below our vinyl. Trim down the side. And just below our pocket, or our seam at the bottom. Since our lining is complete, we're ready to fold everything down for our drop-in lining. So I'm going to add a piece of double-sided tape along the edge just above the line that I drew. Butterfly open the seams and come back around to the other side, keeping my tape line just above the line. Come back around, open the side seam, holding that side seam open. I'm going to meet myself back around at the other side. We can start by peeling off this double-sided tape on one end. Push our side seam open so that it stays. And we're going to begin folding down our seam to meet that line that we drew. So starting at our seam over here on the side, just hold everything open and push it down to that line. Because this area is the thickest in the seam, I'm going to go ahead and hold that with a clip and continue on bringing this raw edge down to the line that I drew. You can add a couple clips to just hold it in place, especially if you're not using a super heavy duty tape. Coming around the side. Bringing our seam down to meet our seam. Adding a clip to hold the thicker spots in place. And continuing on around the rest of the bag. And back around to where we started. So now we have our main lining, or our lining piece, completely folded down around the top. We need to do the same for our exterior. Our exterior, we didn't need to draw a line around because we have the Decaville light that we're just going to fold over all the way around. So we're going to use that seam to push over and down. So I need to do the same thing and line the inside of just above that, or just below, I guess I should say, the line of the Decaville light. I'm going to add double-sided tape around the inside of the bag. So I have my strip of double-sided tape just under the edge of the Decaville. And now I'm going to find the seam where I stopped the tape. Peel off the tape and fold everything down up against that Decaville. Just going to go back and add a couple clips where it's wanting to lift up around the edge. And back around to where we started. So now with our lining and our exterior edges folded over, I want to run another line of double-sided tape just under 1/8 of an inch, because I don't want my top stitch to go through it, but I do want it to be secure and hold everything in place and not shift around. So I do want to get it just as close as I can to that 1/8 inch mark, or the 1/8 inch measurement just below the bag. Now we can add our lining, and we want to make sure that the back side is going to the back side that we want. So I want my zipper along the back side of my bag. And everything should fit nice since our lining seam allowance was smaller. I'm going to start by lining up our side seams, clipping those together. side seams together. Then carefully move the clips that we've had, keeping each one together to now hold both of them together. And if we start at those seams on the side, everything should fit in nicely together. So now everything is clipped together. I can go back and find that beginning tape from the seam, peel that off, line our side seams back up, carefully pull the tape away, keeping our edges together, move our clip down, move our tape, pull our tape. So I'm just essentially removing the backing of the tape, keeping the seams together that I just lined up. Just really focusing on keeping those exterior and interior lined up so that when we top stitch, it's all nice and pretty. And we're back around to where we started, and everything is lined up all nice and neat around the top. We can go ahead and top stitch. Okay, so I like to start in the side seam that goes around to the front. I'm going to start by pulling my thread tails long. Stick my bag underneath my foot. Line it up with the edge of my presser foot. And drop in my needle right into that side seam all the way through. With my thread tails long, I'm going to begin stitching around my bag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance using a number 4 stitch length. I'm keeping an eye on my layers to make sure they're not shifting, but because of the tape, we shouldn't have any issues. Using my finger to keep my zipper from getting into the stitching. As I get towards the edge in the corner, I can kind of manipulate my bag so I can prepare to turn it around the corner. So this area is pretty thick here. So if you need to use a hump jumper, you can also squeeze that area down before we begin with key fob pliers. Now we want to use a regular hand needle to pull these sets of threads through the same hole they came from and up through the middle in between the 2 layers of vinyl. So now you have all 4 of our threads in the middle. Tie off a knot super tight and it'll sink down into that seam. Now we can take our needle again, thread all 4 threads through the eye of the needle. We're going to stick the needle down through the seam. We're going to have to go through the double-sided tape that we stuck in there, but that's okay. Stick the needle as far in as you can until you get to the cotton area. And try and push your needle out through that seam between your lining. So I'm pulling the needle out through, pulling the needle out through the inside of the bag. With all 4 threads. And if you can't pull all through, if it's too tight, you can just snip these right there and pull the remaining threads back out of the top, and that thread will sink down in there, and so the knot thread tails are a couple inches long, tucked inside that main body. So now our bag is completely top stitched. All I need to do is add our handles and we're complete. Okay, for the straps, we can't get this hardware through the connector after we punch the holes, so I need to do the holes, rivet, and then add the strap connectors after it's on the bag. To punch the hole marks for our connectors, I'm going to use B and C on our strap rivet guide. And then I just need to add this to all of our straps to get the right markings. Since it's a 1-inch strap, I can just line it up to the edge of the strap and line up the middle line to, or the side line to your stitching to make sure everything's center. And repeat on all 4 sides. I showed my cam snap press in earlier parts of the video, so this time I want to show my hand punch from MoreMeKnow that you can also use. It's super easy. It has different size holes that you can use here, and I'm just going to line it up with my mark and squeeze. Line it up with my mark. Make sure everything went through. And now we can... As I was finishing up my straps, my phone died. So I have gone ahead and I have attached my handles using a rivet and our figure 8 connectors. And this is the Cici Tote by Kaya Papaya. I really hoped you enjoyed this tutorial. I'd love to see what you make. Please post in my group Creating with Joleelee on Facebook, and as well post in the Kaya Papaya design group. She'd love to see what you make as well. Thanks, we'll see you soon. For this bag, we did a computer mock-up and kind of generated what exactly we wanted and envisioned for this bag. But there's so many pieces that I just wanted to take a second to go over all the pieces with the bag, so that if you're making this at home, you can write down on your pattern, draw on it, color in with pencil, put it on your computer as well, and you know what each piece is. So I'm going to go down the list. This piece here is the exterior body, the pink. We have the cotton piece at the bottom is our lining bottom. I have stabilized the entire bag with Decaville Light. I did use a woven interfacing on this bottom accent here just to prevent any stretching. This is our base bottom. I interfaced that with Decaville Heavy. This is our lining top, this pink accent that goes around the top of our lining. We have a zipper overlay on the inside. These are laser cut zipper overlays that we offer on our website. They can be customized with your logo or text of your choice. For the zipper end, you can choose to add a matching vinyl, or you can use a piece of hardware like we've done there. This in here is going to be our divided slip pocket, and I have done a slip pocket accent on the top. This area in here is going to be our recessed zipper. I have done both sides with vinyl, but you can choose to do vinyl on the exterior and fabric on the inside, or you can choose to do fabric on both or vinyl on both like I did. These here on the front are our strap connectors. We have our straps, and there is an option for side connectors that you can add as well. And these are our exterior slip pockets, and I have used a moon magnet on the front, and I have not added a magnet on the back, just so you can slide your phone in as you're carrying it as well. We have also added a tassel that is not included in the pattern, but it was just a fun little accent that we thought really pulled the bag together. So I really hope this helps you visualize your bag when you make it as well.